All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Stuart Jordan for Attitude Magazine, and you are listening to Attitude's ADHD Experts. In this hour of ADHD Experts, we're going to be talking about kid-friendly strategies for managing time. Our guest today is Marydee Sklar, and she is a time management educator and founder of Executive Functioning Success. Her unique approach to teaching time management, the Sklar process, comes from her background as a reading specialist as well as her own experience with executive function deficits. You can learn more about Marydee at her website, www.executivefunctioningsuccess.com. Marydee is also the author of 3 Seeing My Time books, including her latest book for parents, 50 Tips to Help Students Succeed. The topic today is kid-friendly strategies for managing time with an ADHD mind. Thank you, Marydee, for joining us. We're so pleased to have you here today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Before we get going, just a couple of housekeeping notes and some answers to some common questions. First, post your questions in the box on your screen. Type them in there. Marydee is going to start with an introduction to the topic with some slides that will last for about 15 to 20 minutes or so, and the balance of the hour will be devoted to answering your questions. If you're having problems hearing us, the problem is almost always your internet connection, and it could be slow and it could be breaking up. If in fact you're having that problem, if you can switch to the telephone, that usually solves the problem. If that's not an option, just type a little note in the question box and we will try and basically give you some instructions on how to clear up your question, your listening problems. After our session today, the slides that you'll be seeing, as well as an audio recording of this broadcast, will be on the Attitude website, attitudemag.com/webinars, where you'll be able to get the link and download the slides. And in a week or so, you'll also find a podcast version of today's webinar in the ADHD Experts audio series on iTunes. So with those notes, let's go ahead and get started, and over to you, Marydee.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. Let's go to the first slide there, Stuart. And then how I got into this whole business, you guys, is this slide right here. I refer to my work, or I do slideshows, as Inside a Mind Without Time, and it's because of my own mind's problems. I spent the first 40 years of my life describing myself as an underachieving procrastinator. I was supposed to be this smart kid. They told me that when I was a kid. I had these test scores, but I always figured that they made a mistake, because if I was so smart, how come I couldn't get things done? How come I was I chronically late? How come my house was a disaster? How come I was screaming at the kids in the morning to get them out the door? How come the soccer clothes were, inside the wash machine instead of in the dryer when the kids needed them? Why wasn't there food in the refrigerator for lunches? All of those things just thwarted me in my life. And it was about a little over 20 years ago now. I was running a program at a local elementary school to teach volunteers to teach reading to at-risk kids. And I'm the kind of learner who was always trying to find new information, so I found myself at the University of Portland with Dr. Ellen Arwood, and she had interesting ideas about how we think, and she felt that we didn't all think alike. Now, 20 years ago, that was a very radical notion. We didn't have the kinds of brain scans and information that we have today. And at that point in time, Ellen identified me as a visual thinker who had temporal problems, is how she put it, issues with time. And because we didn't even have the definition of executive functions, which we know so much about today. So she challenged me to draw a picture of what I did in a week. So next slide, please, Stuart. This is the picture that I drew of what I had to do in a week. And when Ellen saw this picture, she said, "Oh dear." You know, I see a woman who has no sense of herself in time and space. So people look at this and either go, "Oh dear," or many look at it and go, this is my life. Well, when I handed Ellen this picture, I was angry because if you'll notice on the bottom of that picture, it says it took me 2 hours to figure this out. And I told her, I don't have 2 hours to plan my week. I can't possibly do that. I'm just, you know, hanging on by my fingernails. So she spent some time with me clarifying what she meant by drawing a picture. And at the end of the hour, I said, "But wait a minute, Ellen. There's more to this problem that I have than drawing a picture." Because I had read every time management book and program and tried everything, and nothing had stuck. Nothing had helped me change my behavior. So Ellen gave me this advice, and I want everybody to kind of pause and wrap your brain around this. She said, "Okay, I want you to go home, take care of yourself in time and space, and come back and see me." Time and space, come back and see me. I must have said it over and over again as I went out to the car because I don't remember much that people say auditorially to me. But it took me a year to figure out what she meant about this time and space thing. I was really, in that year's time, I was watching my behavior and analyzing, how did I get into this situation? How come I'm late? What set me up to have this disaster happen? So then my son's fourth grade teacher called. Oh yeah, anyway, by the end of a year's time, my life was totally different. My house was clean, my life was organized, I wasn't screaming at the kids. My sister came to visit from California and she said, "What did you do?" You know, that was just so obvious within 5 minutes of being in my house that I had made a dramatic shift. So then my son's teacher called. He was in fourth grade at that time, and she said he's being a complete flake. He's not turning anything in. So I thought, what can I do to help him manage papers? That was the issue that was confronting him at that point. In a galaxy far, far away, I had taught fourth grade. And after a few weeks, I said, "So Josh, is this helping at all?" And he paused and said, "Yeah, it's less stressful. I'm not getting yelled at for not having my papers." So then I found myself working with my friends' kids, and then total strangers started showing up at my door. At that point in time, I was a private reading specialist working with kids with dyslexia. And ultimately, what was happening was about for 15 years, I was doing research around my dining room table. These families would show up, and I would sit and I would analyze, okay, now what is it that they don't understand about time and space that I do, and how can I teach them? How can I help them make those leaps in their brain so that they can change behavior? So I was working on this little workbook that I had, and I would go downstairs and I would change it each week and mix it up and move it around. And eventually I became very well known in my community of Portland, Oregon, and people, all kinds of people, were referring to me, behavioral pediatricians and neuropsychs and counselors and educators and happy families who'd worked with me, and people wanted me to publish my work. And I remember thinking, "Oh, I'm not a college professor. Who's going to buy it?" But I started doing some research, and I realized that while I was at my dining room table using my skills as a reading specialist, which understands how to build things, to teach things in a multi-sensory, hands-on, step-by-step process, I had this skill set that I knew how to teach the concepts of time management, planning, and organization. And out there in the other world, in the neuroscience world, they were all out there using brain scans and lots of different kinds of research techniques and starting to describe these problems with time management, planning, and organization as the result of our executive functions in our brain. So I was doing over here how to teach it, and they were over here describing what to do about it. And so it became this, perfect joining where I was like, okay, I know how to teach this. And a lot of people were running around saying, well, how do you? And I do know. So next slide, please. So this is a picture of how I teach what I call the Sklar process, the picture that the understanding I have of teaching these skills. And I come at it differently than most people do. This is what I discovered. Most people, when they want to fix, in quotation marks, someone's time management problems, they go straight to the strategies. They'll say, okay, use this planner, use this timer, do this, do that. And that's not the place to start. Because what you have to do to start is to understand that anybody who has trouble with getting something done, meeting expectations, they have an integrity issue. They are letting the people around them down, and they're letting themselves down. It's a very, very painful place to be. So you end up with a lot of defensive behavior. And you will see this a lot with a lot of ADHD kids as well as ADHD adults who just go, nothing works. I tried that, didn't work. Tried that, didn't work. There's a lot of defensiveness. So when I'm working with people, I'm always very compassionate, and I realize that there's a lot of pain there that I have to very carefully get around, and how I get the entrance, the access to opening up that defensive piece is that I educate people about their brain. So that's that left side part of that first picture up there, is that I help people understand that it's not about them, it's about their brain. And when you take that guilt away from it being a function of them being bad people, they just don't try hard enough, they don't have the right willpower, when you remove it from that realm and put it into the realm of, well, it's like I wear glasses, I can't see without my glasses. It doesn't make me a bad person, it just means I need glasses. And likewise, if I have challenges with executive functioning, it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person, it just means that I have challenges and I need to understand them, and then I need to use tools to support my weaknesses. So the process that I developed, this course, it generally lasts 8 to 10 hours, and we all use a workbook, and when I work with children, I only work with children and their parents because this is a system issue, parents and a brain development issue. So the whole family needs to be engaged. So what happens is we go through this process of teaching about their brain. It's 2 hours, almost 3 hours before I even bring up a strategy. But what I'm doing is helping them change their thinking, their metacognition, which means thinking about your thinking. They change their self-awareness over time. Then I bring in those external visual tools, the things that support that brain. That's what Russell Barkley is always talking about, is you have to externalize the things that our brain can't internally do. And so then my program, when we go through this, you get to really see changes. Now, there's no magic wand. I will, if you want a magic wand, you guys, it's not out there. It's a little by little process because the medications, for instance, don't teach the skills. So you have to teach time management and planning and organization skills. But you can see just dramatic changes, and I love my work because I get to see people change over, week by week, and it's very, very exciting. Okay, next slide, please. Time management skills are essential for success. These executive function skills are critical for success in school and in life beyond, and we have to teach them. And they're being taught now. I know people are using my Seeing My Time program in some colleges and in schools as well as in therapy settings. And it's very exciting because if we teach these skills, then people understand how to transfer the skills to different situations in their lives. So I'm here to help you do this. And today we're just going to cover a few of my key ideas before we get into the question section. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we've talked about this before, and then, blame the brain, don't blame the child. So this is a very difficult thing to do sometimes. We get really frustrated when children are not getting their homework done. They're not managing their stuff. They're always late. You need to let go of that label of lazy and unmotivated and procrastinating, because I want you to understand that there is hope. Okay, next slide. Now, what I discovered way back 20 years ago when Dr. Arwood told me to take care of myself in time and space, what became apparent to me very quickly is that the problem was twofold. One was my brain, which has absolutely no internal sense of the passage of time. Many brains do not. The people I call time challenged often have no idea about the passage of time. They only live right in the right now. So my brain has no sense of time. So that set me up. But the other problem is time itself. It is invisible. We can't see time. Show me 5 minutes. A kid, put up his hand with 5 fingers. I said, no, that's 5 fingers. Time is invisible. So our brain plays with time. We think that time stretches, because I'm sure all of you have had that experience of having to sit in a car while somebody runs into the store to get some milk or something like that. And you're sitting in the car. Of course, this is pre-cell phone days. We can entertain ourselves now. But if you're sitting in the car and you're just waiting for somebody, time seems to slow way down. It takes forever. Whereas if you're doing something that's fun, that you enjoy, time goes really fast. And so our brain thinks that time is going to stretch. This is what happens to us when we say, oh, I'll do it this weekend, or I'll do it after dinner, or I'll do it later. We think that the time is going to stretch out so that we can fit all these things that we want to do into it. Well, wipe that out of your brain, you guys. It does not stretch. It is little tiny blocks of spaces of time, and that's how I want you to think about it. It's spaces of time, and only so much is going to fit in those spaces. It's not like those suitcases that you have the extra zipper, and you can kind of put more stuff into it, open it up, make it bigger. No. Time is a spatial thing. They don't even really understand time that much. The physicists are so discussing this. But time as we know it, you need to think of it as little spaces. So the solution is to become what I call a time scientist. Next slide, please. So the time scientist is we need to see the space of time. We have to externally start figuring out where does our time go and how long does it take for us to do things, because people who are time challenged are very bad at estimating. They often either overestimate or underestimate. So now what's on your screen is a little form that I call being a time scientist. And what you want to do is write down a task and then put down your guess. And your guess is how long do you think it's going to take you? And then you notice the time that starts. And then when you're finished with your task, write down how long it really took. Now this is really important for kids to do. They often believe that homework is going to take forever. This is what's in their brain. And they don't want to do homework forever. They want to play first when they get home from a long day at school. They want to do other things, fun things. So they put it off till later, thinking time is going to stretch. And then they start too late, and then they end up working too late, and there's emotional breakdowns because they're exhausted. All that whole stuff starts happening. And what many students discover is that if they don't multitask, they stay on one homework assignment at a time, often it doesn't take so long. So they start to see concretely that, oh, I was wrong about that. It really didn't take that long. I just had a child at my table yesterday who said, Marydee, I was so upset. He has a lot of emotional control issues, a lot of high anxiety, and he said, I just got so wound up, Marydee. And then I went, no, I'm just going to start. And he goes, you know what, it didn't take so long. You know, he and I are working on this whole emotional control stuff, but it's like he realized, and he had this internal experience now, that the task he thought was so big wasn't so big. So you can have your kids time homework, they can time chores, they can, how long does it take to empty the trash? How long does it take to take the dog around the block? How long does it take to make my bed? Because they need to understand how much space of time things take in order to plan their days. Now this form, if you want, at the end of the slides, there's a link to my website that you can download this form if you want to use it, and it has directions that go with it. So that's one step, is helping them understand how long things take. Okay, next slide, please. The other thing that I learned about time back when I was figuring this out was that I only did what was in front of me. Because my brain, because it only exists in the present, all it cares about is what's in front of me and what's in front of it. It doesn't have future. So the only way I can get things done and manage time is to see it. So I have to put things in front of me. And likewise for your folks. Next slide, please. So our job as parents, and perhaps our educators online, is to change the environment around your time-challenged person. You need to have lots of tools in front of you. The dry erase boards and calendars and timers, those kinds of things are very important. Next slide, please. That's what I call time tools. So clocks are very important. One thing I want to talk about clocks, it's very important to have analog clocks in front of you instead of just digital, because digital clocks only show you one aspect of time. They show you right now. Whereas an analog clock, the old-fashioned face clocks, they show you what time it is right now, and they show you the future. How much longer do I have? They also show you the past. How long have I been doing this task? So very important to have analog clocks all over your universe, anywhere where you get lost in time. So I have one in front of my computer screen, I have one in my shower, I have one on my wrist. Most people today say, I don't need a watch, I've got my cell phone. Well, cell phones are kept in your pocket. They're out of sight, out of mind. And if you pick up your cell phone to check the time, that, particularly for an ADHD mind, is an invitation to the universe. You pick up that phone, you're going to check the time. What do you see? Oh, I've got a text message or email, and you just zoop, you're gone. Completely lost control of your time because you've gone into that whole universe. So a watch is really, really critical. I've had so many people have changed their lives around by starting to wear watches again. They go get the batteries, put them in, and they use them, and preferably an analog clock. Let's go to the next slide, please. Connecting to the future. Now, the future is the problem with this brain. A brain that only exists in the present doesn't see or care about the future. In fact, most young people, children, they're what's called an event horizon line. What they care about is only a few days out. Some of them, it's shorter than that, but it's only a few days out. If it gets into this window of like 4 days, 3, 4 days, 5 days, suddenly now it's important. So that's why kids, when they have all those projects to do in the future, it's due in a month. You know, it was assigned a month ago, and suddenly your kid shows up the night before or 3 days before, like, oh my gosh, Mom, I got to get this big project. Can you go to the store and buy me this, board for my presentation or something? It wasn't in their minds at all. So that event horizon line is really important to understand. So we have to take the future and make it present. So one of the things I recommend students do is print off calendars, just using Outlook or whatever kind of calendar program you've got. Print off, well, at this point in time, January, February, March, the next grading period, and stick those calendars up in front of you in a space where you're going to see it, not someplace you're not going to see it, but someplace you're going to look at it. And on that calendar, the only things I want them to put on there are projects and tests, and possibly things that will impact their weekends, like if they're going to be gone for a soccer tournament or something like that, that would go on there. Because what they need to do is they need to see that future coming. And then I really encourage kids to cross off each day as it goes. Now that's something kindergarten and first grade teachers used to do, and then they stop. You should be still doing that all the way through high school with kids. Marking off the days so they can see the space of time getting shorter and shorter between their deadline and themselves at this particular moment in time. So seeing that future piece is really important. Another piece that's been really handy for parents is what I call a 15-minute or less family check-in. And what needs to happen then is if everybody gathers around the table for 10 minutes and whip out their planners, their calendars that they have, and everybody checks in and syncs. Okay, what are you doing this week? I'm going to be out of town, says Dad, so I can't pick up the kids on Wednesday night, so we're going to have to cover a Wednesday with some other situation. And then you can turn to your kid and say, okay, this week, is there any projects that are coming? Do you need me to get anything from the store for you or order something for you? Do you need any support this week? Everybody sees what's coming. Very, very important. So this is to get this strategy to work. Almost all of you probably have some kind of phone with a reminder in it. I have my clients, some of the last things I do with them before I send them out the door is they make a date for themselves. They pick a date, they pick a time, and they set a recurring reminder to have a family meeting so that they show up and all sync their calendars. Okay, next slide, please. The other thing that I've learned, and it's really important for you to understand, is that you can't do what you can't do. So quite often the child who is procrastinating and not doing what they need to do, it's simply because they can't. Now, this became so apparent one time when I had a young man who was in high school. I think he was a freshman or sophomore. His mom was actually a special educator, and he was not getting things done. He had dyslexia, significant ADHD, and we were going through the course, and we were probably about 4 or 5 weeks in, and every time people show up, we do what's called a check-in, and they answer the question, what's working well? So she came in this day, and she was just kind of bouncing out of her skin. Her eyes were just shining, and she was so excited, and they sat down, and she started to write, and then she looked up, and she said, oh, Marydee, she goes, I just got to tell you this. She turned and she looked at her son, and she said, last night you just started your homework. I didn't have to say anything to you at all. You just sat down, got started on it all by yourself. She goes, what strategies were you using? What metacognition were you using? How did you do that? And he looked at her and he said, I could. And his mom and I just paused and let that sink in. He could. He could do his homework that night independently. He wasn't stuck on something. Quite often students are not starting homework because they are stuck. They're confused about something. Many, many students leave the classroom confused. They think magically when they get home they're going to understand the homework assignment. It doesn't happen. You can't do what you can't do. So the question is, rather than getting really angry with them, is to pause, take a deep breath, calm yourself down, and see if you can determine where the confusion is. They can get hung up on vocabulary words, they can get hung up on concepts, and they may just have an executive function challenge of getting started. So maybe they need some help with you just getting them over that getting started hump. So those are some ideas about that procrastination. So if you have any questions about your child needing, really struggling over homework, it may very well be that they have a learning disability that you need to investigate. So that's kind of the end of the slideshow part of it, and as I said, you can get your Be a Time Scientist document if you go to blamethebrain.com. And now I have more information about the things that I do on my website. But just remember, you guys, there's no magic wand, but little by little, very positive things can happen. Because I've been doing this for so long that the 30-year-olds that I started with that I was very worried about, they're becoming very successful adults. So breathe and have faith. And I'm ready now for questions.
Thanks, Marydee. That's great. We have, folks are really enjoying it. We've got a number of comments that have come in, and so let's jump right in. And a couple of quick ones to begin with. One mother wrote in asking, what's the appropriate age that you realistically that you can start to work with your child in terms of teaching time management? Is there an age below which it's just too young, or any thoughts on when?
Okay, yeah, very good question. It's very much a developmental issue. So keeping in mind, I wish I had a slide to show you the challenge of this. Keeping in mind that these executive skills of time management, planning, and organization really come on very late. So the maturity is really 25 to 30 plus. So be patient in what you're expecting. Now you can't work with little children. Probably the biggest thing to do is be helping them to learn to pause and delay gratification. Okay. Wait a few minutes here. But you can start teaching them. Probably the biggest thing you can teach them is life requires you to do things you don't want to do. Not exactly time management, but helping them understand that they have to do things they don't want to do sometimes before they can do something.
Marydee, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We're having a sound problem on your end.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Is
that better?
No, unfortunately, it's breaking up. It's very garbled.
Let me unplug my mic and try it here. Okay.
Okay.
Just try that.
Go ahead and speak.
How's that?
That's better. We've lost the garbled. So it's a.
Now I've lost you altogether here. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, and it's clear.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. So where was I? So it's a developmental issue. You can always start young, but don't get frustrated because it's going to take years for you to be modeling and practicing with kids. So helping them realize that things don't take forever if we get the work done, put tasks into very small chunks, and help them understand that little by little they've got to get their work done and then they can play. That's probably my biggest time management piece for younger kids. And as they age, in terms of teaching, like my Time program, that's more concrete to develop that metacognition that's required to make all these choices, that I generally start with at older fifth through adults, because it takes, metacognitively speaking, their self-awareness starts to improve dramatically during those years. So it's a little by little process. Another question?
Yeah, sorry, it was muted there. There are a number of questions about teaching routines. How do you introduce it, and how do you basically get them to start doing it?
Okay, routines are really important because when you have routines, you're actually lowering the load on the brain. You don't have to remember all of the pieces. So teaching routines, I know there's a great whole chapter section in the tips book that I did, and I'll see if I can simplify this for you or say it verbally here. This is an idea I got from Richard Lavoie, who wrote a book, and I know you're going to have a title here, and I'm going to have trouble with times. I think it has to do with motivation. It's Richard Lavoie, and I don't have it on top of here, on top of my brain. But what it is you have to teach routines. Quite often, I didn't understand this when I was a parent. We think that if we tell a child something once or maybe twice, they should have it down. Just do this, like for instance, cleaning a bathroom. Okay, let's pick that one. And you say, okay, you go in here and you just wipe down the toilet, wipe down the sink, and you know, sweep up get the hair off the floor or whatever, and do it. Just do it. That's what you need to do. But actually, you have to teach it in a very, very concrete way. So the first thing you do is have your student come along, your child come along with you and say, okay, this is what we're going to do today, and all they're going to do is watch. And I would recommend that you have them time them. They can be the timekeeper. So you're going to watch how long it takes to clean this bathroom. And you're going to talk. You're going to give them a lot of you're going to talk your way all the way through the process. You're going to say, okay, first we're going to do this, we're going to lift up this, we're going to wipe this down, we're going to put this. You want to do each and every step that you're doing, and you're going to go through the whole room, and all they're doing is watching. And then the next time you do it, they watch again. And then you might ask a question of them, okay, what do you think I need to do next? And then you have to be showing them and telling them a whole lot longer than you want. And then you start bringing them in. Okay, so now your turn to do this. It's your turn to do the sink. Okay, what do you have to do when you do the sink? Okay, great job. Okay, now I'm going to do the floor. Okay, so it's like teaching them each individual step, and eventually you switch from you doing any of it to them doing all of it, but you're still there observing, and you're still there coaching them to do a better job at it. Then eventually you get to that independent place, but you still need to be monitoring. So you can teach them, but you want to do it in little tiny increments, and it takes you a lot longer than you think it's going to. Like I said, my tips book describes that better perhaps than I just did auditorially. But you just want to go step by step by step, and don't assume they've got it, because that's not how learning happens. It takes multiple repetitions before people actually can do routines. So be patient.
Great. Question comes in from one mom asking, how does a parent with time management issues themselves help a child with time management issues?
That's why I work with parents and kids when I work with families. It's really a challenge. So the challenge then is you have to get control of your own brain and your own sense of time. And that's why I teach the course that I teach, is that you have to develop your own awareness of how you move through time and space and what you need to do. And you start little by little. So I would start looking with the tips book is the easiest, fastest way for me to say how to help you. There's other books that are out there, but just know that you want to do it step by step, and you can't fix everything overnight. So you pick one aspect of your time management that you need to handle and go from there. You need to support yourself with the external tools. You need to have a day planner or a sheet in front of you telling you what you need to do during the day and what times are you possibly going to be doing them. You're going to have to support your own brain in order to support your kids, and it is a challenge, but it's doable. I'm here to tell you, because I was a disaster, and thank goodness I got my brain together so that at an appropriate age for my kids so they could survive. But it can be done, but you're going to have to do some work on it.
A number of questions all address how to deal with using the time, whether it's the clock, the timers or stuff, and there are a number of folks who have made comments about the fact that it works for a while and then it just becomes white noise and the kids don't even recognize that it's there. How do you keep the benefit of the tools functioning?
Okay, that's a good point. You're going to have to, one of the things about the brain is it likes novelty. So particularly an ADHD brain likes novelty. So you have to mix things up a bit. So one of the things you might do is simply have them move around a bit when they're doing their work. Have them not always working in the same place. Move the tools with you. You might mix up the tools and say, okay, this week we're going to use this kind of a timer. Kind of surprise the brain a little bit, because novelty is really important. But the other thing is to really be prepared to support them to keep the tools in front of them and in mind. It's going to be you modeling and you supporting them. But novelty, yeah, mix them up with the different kinds of timers. Different timers work differently for different people, but don't give up. Keep using them. Keep referring back, because what can happen is you say, well, you know, it was working really well when you were writing down your assignments on a dry erase board. And have you noticed how we're getting into all these fights again, or you're getting behind in class? Let's tell you what, let's get that board back out again and try it again. And I'm going to write down on my dry erase board what I need to do, so that you want to not have them always be the bad guy, if you will, or the bad girl, you know, the ones who aren't doing what they need to be doing. You want to be showing them that you need to, all of us need to support our brains to get things done. So that would be my best suggestion to you for that. Keep it novel, move them around, have them do different things, but keep the tools in front of them and talk about why the tools are necessary.
Great. A couple of folks have written in similar questions that have to do with the reminding and the reaction that it gets. And one person says that no matter how many time's almost up warnings we give, at the end of the activity there's always frustration. And how do you get tips into give tips to make a transition without it turning into a major drama?
Yeah, transition, that's a mind. The kids who have really hard time with transitions, that's built into their brains. That's what Dawson and Guare would call mental flexibility. And those kids, and again, you have to teach them that space of time issue as part of it, so that if they can see, I would use I use forms that have, a breakdown of 30 minutes increments. And if we were showing them concretely that, okay, we're going to only work for this period of time, we'll draw a line through it, and have them do it, actually not you do it for them. You help them get into the planning itself, because you want to start offloading you being the executive functioning machine onto them. So as much as possible, you're going to have to model first, show them, continue to model, but you want to start transferring it over for them to be doing the actual planning piece. So a child would say, okay, you're going to need to be working on math from 3:30 to 4 o'clock, and you're going to have them draw a line through there and say, okay, that's going to be math. And then this timer's going to go off. If we're not all the way done, it's okay. We're going to stop. We're going to take a little bit of a 3-minute break, and then we're going to start the next piece that we need to do, or we need to get ready for soccer or something like that. You want to let them see how it's going to fit. A lot of the anxiety and frustration kids have is that they don't see the future time thing, and you need to make it visible in front of them. And that sometimes really helps with the transitions. If they can see what's coming and they have a bit of a plan, and they've been engaged in the planning, it makes the transitions easier.
Great. Now, there are a number of questions related to homework. And one mom writes asking, when son comes home, he always says he needs a break before he starts the homework, and then it becomes a procrastination issue in terms of how much time can you or should you allow for break, and then how do you get past that into the homework time?
Right. Okay, the break is really important, you guys. If you stop and think about, these kids have been, about the brain, these kids' brains, they've been at work all day long, often doing things that they don't want to do. And a lot of us, we get home from a day of work, we don't want to sit down and go do more work. So first of all, have some compassion there. Again, this is going back to being the time scientist that I talked about a little bit earlier, and what I was talking about, seeing that space of time. So you want to schedule in some break time. The brain needs some downtime, and it needs food. So you want to give it some food for energy, for thinking. So you need to recharge the brain. You start in the morning with just X amount of energy literally in your brain, and it gets used up during the day. So by the time your child comes home, there's not a lot of extra energy in there. You're tired, they're tired, and so it's just it's a recipe for disaster. So you need to give them some time to have some food to eat and to do something that relaxes the brain, which actually could include some exercise, some movement, going for walks, moving around a little bit, something, not necessarily video games, okay, because that's going to uses up actually a lot of energy, but some kinds of activities, it's a transition piece. But then show them where that transition fits, and then if you've been taking, you do the time scientist thing, and they can figure out, okay, homework is going to take this much time, this much time, this much time. You can show them that if they just get started right after that break time, they will actually have time after their work is done to play video games or text with their friends or listen to music or watch TV. You want them to see that there will be space if they get started on it, because a lot of the procrastination is thinking, oh, it's going to take up all my time, I'll never have any time, and then it pushes it to the point where you end up with the disasters and the meltdowns. So they do need a break, but let them see that there is going to be some space for them, there's going to be some time if they keep it in front of them and they can see it.
Mom writes in asking about during the homework process, she observes that her son is able to focus for maybe 5-6 minutes, and then it starts to wander, and she's sort of questioning, should she work within the time blocks that he functions in, or should she be focused more on trying to expand those time blocks and stop them from being so short?
I would work in the time slots that work for him. Many brains can really focus for like 10-15 minutes. It depends, some of them are, or less. So you can't do what you can't do. So when you have a child whose focus can last that 5 minutes, then at the end of that 5 minutes, what you might do is shift. You shift to doing homework standing up in the kitchen on a different counter. You shift to another room. You shift to a different subject. You eat some healthy nuts, something like that. Yeah, work with what they can do, and then give the brain a bit of a shift, a bit of a change, because you have to get their dopamine levels up. Dopamine is that part of the reward system in the brain, and it helps us with focus and pay attention. So something that she might try is using this can help a little bit. There's a cube timer that's on my website. There's no name on this timer. It's just called a cube timer, C-U-B-E. It's this cute little box. And what I like about this timer is all you do to turn it on is to flip it. So all you have to do is flip it over. And so you'd say to your son, they'll have different time increments on them. And it would say, okay, let's see if you can work on this for 10 minutes. So you can flip it to like a 5-minute interval, and he's working on that. And as soon as he flips it, saying, I can work on this for 5 minutes, when he flips it, it's actually activating a part of your brain that's connected to getting dopamine into your system. And that prediction that he's making gives him a little hit. And then when the timer goes off and he's actually sat there for 5 minutes, he gets a push, just like a video game. Woo! He feels good. And say, you know what? Let's see if he can do it another 5. Okay, so, and he gets to turn it. He flips it. And just that flipping might extend his time. Okay, so you honor the time, but the flipping of the timer might actually help him stay focused, particularly if he's a kid who can play video games and stay focused for a long time.
Quick question came in. When it comes to homework time, what's your feeling about parental involvement in terms of, should you be sitting there helping them manage their time, or should you be trying to get them to manage their own time?
This is one of the things where you're going to be working from the point of going to where, it depends on the age of the child and what their abilities are. Your goal isn't to do the work, all right, but you may be it may be very necessary for you to be there to help them start it and to be monitoring their ability to stay on that task or to come back to the task. So what I recommend for parents is, okay, if you have a child who just can't get started, you can say, okay, you're going to sit down here and you get started on this work, and I'm going to sit over here at this other end of the table, and I'm going to do my work. So that they see that you have work to do. All of us have work to do. We can all of us have something to work on. That way you're monitoring them, because it's really dangerous to turn a kid over and say, go to your room and do your homework. Oh my goodness. You know, that's just, with all the internet stuff, it's so easy for them just to wander off immediately. And so keeping them in sight and monitoring at least the point that they are working, that they're not playing on their computers, and all the kids with the laptop, the iPads now, oh my goodness, everybody's gone for homework, and the kids spend 90% of their time not on what they need to be doing. So you want to have those things where you can see them. And eventually, you know, that will build in. You got to get your work done, and when you get your work done, then you'll have time for fun. So you need to be monitoring longer than you would like. I know my son, years after he had failed the first time he went off to college, I told him, you know, if I had done this over again when you were in high school, if I had it to do over again, this is after I learned more about the brain, I said, I would have, instead of sending you downstairs to work alone, I would have had you at the dining room table, and I would have been asking you to show me your completed work each time. And he said to me, you're right, you should have. That's what the other kids' moms were doing. And it was like a knife in my stomach, you know, because I just thought he could go ahead and do it, you know. But what he was doing was he would get stuck, he would play video games, you know, his ears were so sensitive that, you know, he could tell when I took a step towards that room, and he would, you know, click. He was back to the word processing thing, you know. So keeping them in sight is really important, because they need that support. Quite often the biggest problem is getting started. I know I had a young high school student who I was so proud of her when they reported in that she said, Mom, I have a project to do I don't want to do. Can you please come sit next to me while I work on it? And her mom, God bless her, said yes. And she went and got stuff off of her desk, and she worked. So they were supporting each other. So it's not about when are you ever going to grow up. It's like, I need help attacking this thing I don't want to do.
One mom writes in and asks a question about what happens when you've got, you put all this work into doing things and getting the tools at home for homework and for time management, and they don't have the similar things at school. How do you try and address this dichotomy between what happens at home and what happens at school?
That's a tough one. A lot of it, it's a difficult place. Teachers need education, and that's one of the things I do. Is I do more and more teacher education too. And I'm not putting them down. It's just that this brain science and all this stuff is pretty new, you guys. You guys are on the cutting edge even listening to this. And teachers are busy at work. They don't have time to listen to all these things. Many of them are very overworked. They have a lot of demands placed on them. And they may not be so up on things. So the things that you can do is educate them gently. I know that there's lots of books that out there. The reason why I wrote the tips book the way I did was I wanted a very simple book, and a lot of my parents are giving their tip book to their teachers. I have schools who are actually giving that tip book to all their teachers to help them begin to understand executive functions. So then you can create that dialogue between the two of you. But they don't understand why, so you need to help them understand the why, and then they will be willing to share the strategies between the two of you. It's a gentle process, though, but we have to educate teachers.
We're starting to run short on time. We've got maybe time for a couple more questions.
Okay.
There are a couple that focus on the subject of frustration, and one that stood out was the mother who writes that her son comes home, he starts right away on his homework, he's very focused, he's very dedicated, and he still can't get it done. and taking more and more time. How do you address when they're trying it and it's still not, time management is still not succeeding?
Yeah, that's probably not necessarily even time management, all right? What that sounds like to me, and can be, one of two things. One of them is processing speed. And processing speed is just how fast you can do things. It's like the input and the output part of the brain. The hard drive in the middle can work really, really well, but it's getting things in and getting things out. So processing speed is often the problem with these kids who really are trying hard. They're really not trying to screw around and not do what they need to do. They just literally, everything takes them longer. So testing can give you that information, and then taking that information to schools and IEPs and 504s and saying, my child takes forever to do this work. He's working really hard. Can we make an accommodation to shorten the amount of work done so that we can show he has mastery, but not necessarily have to do as many problems to show that mastery? So yeah, these kids are working really, really hard. So give that kid's brain a break now and again. Don't drag them into the ground. The other issue is they may not actually know how to do it. Back to that, you can't do what you can't do. So there may be some confusion that's slowing them down.
Great. And a very specific question. Suggestions or tips to give to the children about test taking at school, how to manage their time for tests.
Okay. One of the things with that's another teacher thing that we have to educate, is have the kids start to notice how long it takes them to write. If it's a writing test, for instance, at home, just play around with how long does it take you to write a paragraph? Or how long does it take you to write a sentence? So they begin to see time, not to stress out about it, but to see time and just practicing an awareness of time. But what can happen is anxiety can go into play. So have the kids just take deep breaths, get very centered, calm their own brain. A lot of kids, the older kids who get stressed about tests, that kind of stuff, have them do a brain dump. Dump out all your fears onto a piece of paper, because you need to clear out the anxiety in your system before you can actually access what you know. So that's just practice. Again, this estimating is the problem. They don't know how to estimate, so you need to collect data for them to understand how long it takes to do things.
Thanks. So we're just about out of time. So Marydee, any last general thoughts or tips or comments to leave the folks with?
Be patient. Be supportive, and have compassion, and keep learning. Don't give up when something doesn't work right now. This is a marathon and not a sprint to teach executive functioning skills. Remember, 25 to 30 plus. So you need to be there more like a coach, kind of guiding, helping them with tools. It's not easy, you guys, and it says easy. But you've got to be on the edge there, watching and supporting and encouraging them to use those tools. And over time, they will adapt those that work for them. That's what I've seen in all my young students who've grown into adults. They know the tools that they need to use, and they're using them as adults. But it takes time for them to see meaning. They have to connect meaning to using the tools. They have to feel it.
Great. Thank you, Marydee, so much for taking this time today with us. Everybody really appreciated it. We've got a lot of super comments. There's one about somebody that your work helped them immensely. And just to remind everybody, Marydee's website, www.executivefunctioningsuccess.com. And the other one was blamethebrain.com.
That's for the form.
Right. And also remind everybody that the slides and the link to a recording of today's session will be available at attitudemag.com/webinars later this afternoon. And thank you again. And then just a quick reminder, in February, we've got a full schedule of webinars coming up. Next week, we'll be doing sound therapy with Charlene Habermeyer. And then we've got strategies for keeping resolutions, bipolar disorder and ADHD, and for moms only later in February. So thank you, everyone, for attending, and we will see you again. Thank you, Marydee.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.